Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a fascinating study from May 9th, 2026. It's by Alia J. Crum and her colleagues, and it's titled The Role of Stress Mindset in Shaping Cognitive, Emotional, and Physiological Responses to Challenging and Threatening Stress. It was published in the journal Anxiety, Stress, and Coping. Look, if you've ever felt completely overwhelmed by pressure and kind of wondered, is my body's reaction totally out of my control? Well, this is exactly the science you need to hear about. Here's the roadmap for our journey today. We're going to start by rethinking the stress response. Then we'll break down the researchers' 2x2 stress experiment, go over the exact measurements they took, and dive into their findings on both emotion and hormones. Finally, we'll wrap it all up with what this actually means for your daily stress management.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, Rethinking the Stress Response. This is basically the baseline of the current literature. To ground us, the authors provide this foundational definition. They write, simply put, a situation is deemed threatening when the individual evaluates the environmental demands to outweigh their resources or ability to cope. So if you feel like you've got the skills to handle the pressure, your brain calls it a challenge. But if the danger or the uncertainty feels way too high, boom, it becomes a threat. But here's the real kicker. What happens when you just can't magically increase your skills or lower the demands of the situation? That is the exact problem this study set out to tackle. And that brings us to the researchers' core hypothesis. They wanted to know if we can actually bypass that immediate evaluation just by changing our overarching belief about stress itself. They defined two mindsets. First, the stress is enhancing mindset, or SIE. That's the belief that stress naturally leads to growth and better performance. On the flip side, the stress is debilitating mindset, or SID, is the belief that stress basically just depletes and damages you. So the big question is, does holding one of these mindsets actually alter your literal biological response to a threat?
Section 2, the 2x2 stress experiment. Let's call this the crucible.
To figure this out, the researchers built a really brilliant 2x2 experimental matrix. First, they manipulated the general mindset of their 113 participants. Half of them watched a 3-minute video highlighting the enhancing effects of stress, and the other half watched a video about how debilitating it is. Next, they threw them into a mock job interview. To manipulate the immediate situation, half got positive feedback. So the interviewers smiled, nodded, praised them, basically creating a manageable challenge condition. The other half faced a threat condition. In this one, the interviewers furrowed their brows, crossed their arms, and gave straight-up negative feedback, like actually telling them they weren't articulate. Pretty brutal, right? Just imagine the pressure cooker these folks were in for an hour. They show up, get a baseline established, watch their assigned mindset video, and give their first saliva sample at the 15-minute mark. Then at 30 minutes, it's time for the dreaded mock job interview, which includes an 8-minute speech and a hostile or supportive Q&A. Because, who doesn't love being silently judged by a panel of strangers? Immediately after that, at 50 minutes, they gave a second saliva sample, pushed through a battery of cognitive tasks, and finished up with a final saliva swab at the 60-minute mark.
Section 3, taking the measurements. Let's look at the diagnostics. So how exactly did they capture the psychological and physiological fallout from this intense hour? Well, they used 4 primary tools. To measure mood, they used the PANAS scale. To measure visual attention, they used a dot probe task, which tracks how quickly participants noticed happy versus angry faces. For cognitive flexibility, they used something called the alternative uses task, where they literally asked participants to invent as many creative uses for a newspaper as possible in 2 minutes. And finally, those saliva swabs were assayed for 2 specific hormones: cortisol, which is your classic stress hormone, and DHEAS, which is an anabolic growth hormone that really helps with resilience. Section 4, Findings on Emotion and Cognition. This is part 1 of the breakthrough. So the crucial point is, what did the data actually reveal when these people were pushed to their limits? The researchers found a highly significant difference in positive emotions right after the speech task. They had an effect size of 0.131. Now, in statistical terms, that's a really meaningful shift. It basically tells us that participants who were primed with the stress-is-enhancing mindset and who got the positive feedback experienced a massive spike in positive emotions compared to everyone else. Now, to be fair, if you were in the negative feedback threat condition, your negative emotions stayed high no matter what your mindset was. It just felt bad to be criticized, plain and simple. But as we'll see, the cognitive results revealed something way deeper. Check this out. Under the challenge condition, where the interviewers were actually being supportive, The people with the enhancing mindset showed significantly higher cognitive flexibility on that newspaper task, plus a measurable visual bias toward happy faces. They literally broadened their creative thinking. On the other hand, the folks primed with a debilitating mindset completely squandered the positive situation. Seriously, even though they were getting positive feedback, their cognitive flexibility was worse, and they totally ignored the happy faces. It's like their overarching belief that stress is bad literally blocked them from thriving in a completely manageable situation.
Section 5, Findings on Hormones and DHES. Let's jump into part 2 of the breakthrough.
Let's move on and see how this builds from the mind straight into the physical body itself, because this is where the study completely rewrites the rules. The researchers ran those saliva assays and found a remarkable quadratic time-by-mindset effect on the secretion of DHES. We're talking a massive effect size of 0.186. In behavioral science, that represents a very strong biological shift. And remember, DHES is an anabolic growth hormone. It's the stuff that promotes physiological resilience and literally helps your body recover. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what happened biologically. As expected, cortisol went up for everyone during the mock interview. The stress was very real across the board. But notice the sharp spike in DHES levels right after the task for the participants who had that stress is enhancing mindset. It didn't matter if the interviewers were smiling or scowling at them, the participants who believed stress was a tool for growth physically secreted more of this crucial resilience-building hormone. The researchers summarized this perfectly. They wrote, and I quote, "Adopting a stress is enhancing mindset was indeed beneficial as it relates to positive emotion and DHEAS secretion." They basically prove that you don't necessarily have to make a stressor feel less threatening to get a healthy biological response. Just holding the right meta-belief about stress unlocks literal physical growth.
Section 6, Takeaways for Stress Management. Let's talk about the application.
So how do we take these lab results and actually apply them to our own lives? Well, the main takeaway here is that an enhancing mindset promotes physiological thriving and resilience, even when the stressor is highly threatening. Look, in real life, we can't always just dial down the demands of our environment. Sometimes a deadline is just impossible or you get genuinely bad news. But this research proves that if we can just adopt the mindset that the stress itself is a mechanism to enhance us, we can recruit the exact cognitive resources and physical hormones we need to endure it.
So I'm going to leave you with a final thought to chew on. The next time you face a threat, will you view the stress as debilitating or as a tool for growth? Just by recognizing that stress has the power to enhance you, you just might change your biology. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.